The steel gate shouldn't have been there, but it was, blocking my uncle's trail like it owned the mountain. I didn't touch the brake. The bumper hit, metal screamed, and the gate tore apart like cheap aluminum. Two guards rushed me with stun batons, blue sparks snapping in the cold air. I stepped out. I knew this bend. They didn't. One slipped on the loose gravel I grew up running on. The other caught the old pine root jutting from the dirt. 10 seconds later, both were on their faces, groaning. Then I saw their hands reaching for their radios. I walked to the truck bed, flipped the cover, and pulled out the Remington. Clack, clack. The sound rolled through the canyon like thunder sliding off stone. I pointed the barrel at the dirt between their heads. "Stay down," I said, voice lower than the truck's idle. "Or the sheriff's gonna need a mop, not a handcuff." The forest froze, and for the first time they understood. They were the ones trapped on the mountain, not me. The road up had warned me long before the gate appeared. The signs were everywhere if you knew how to read the mountain. The first hint was the trail itself. It wasn't just wider. It had been carved open, shaved, flattened, pressed down by something big. Not a pickup, not a Forest Service truck. These were tracks from a D8 dozer, or maybe a Caterpillar 963, the kind you only see on million-dollar development jobs. Uncle Marty taught me how to read tire tracks when I was 12. He used to point at impressions in the dirt like a tracker showing wolf prints. "Son," he'd say, "if you ever see tracks this wide up here, it ain't nature, it's money." Back then, I didn't fully get it. Now I did. And it wasn't just the trail. There was a smell on the wind, faint, sharp, out of place. Industrial hydraulic oil. A developer's perfume. Whatever had been moving up this ridge wasn't small, wasn't local, and sure as hell wasn't invited. Still, I kept driving. A knot in my chest tightened with every turn. Part of it was anger, but most of it was guilt. 2 years away from the cabin had been 2 years too long. Work, deadlines, expansion plans, things that felt big at the time, now felt small against the weight of this mountain. I told myself I'd come back sooner, fix the porch, patch the roof, keep the place alive the way Uncle Marty would have wanted, but I didn't. And sometimes, absence can bury a man twice. I drove through switchbacks choked with shadow, watched the sky open and close between the pines. Cold air slid down from the peaks with that crisp, early winter bite, the kind that makes you breathe deeper, whether you want to or not. Then I reached the place where the old crooked mailbox should have been. It was gone. The trail that used to cut left, thin as a hunting path, had become a trimmed, graded access road fit for corporate trucks. Branches sliced clean with mechanical precision, gravel tamped firm. And then I saw it. The gate, new steel, post anchors sunk deep, keypad lock lit with a soft blue LED, cameras angled down like someone was expecting me. Beside it sat a guard booth with a humming HVAC unit and a laminated HOA logo that didn't belong anywhere within 50 miles of this ridge. And the sign, Whispering Pines HOA, private property, no trespassing on my land. Land my uncle bought before any of these people were born. Land he carved a life out of with bare hands and stubborn will. My first reaction wasn't rage, it was disbelief. The kind of disbelief that hits you when you see a stranger wearing your father's jacket or standing in your childhood doorway. But disbelief melts fast up here. The mountain doesn't let you hold on to illusions. What replaced it was something colder, harder, clearer. Someone had put a gate on my land. Someone with machinery, money, and the arrogance to think I'd never come back. They were wrong. The engine idled under me, low and steady, like it was waiting for my decision. I tightened my grip on the wheel and lined up the truck with the center of the gate. No hesitation, I hit the gas. The bumper slammed the steel, metal screamed, and the gate blew apart, exactly the way it deserved to. The guards came next, then the radios, then the Remington, and finally, the silence. But the mountain never stays quiet for long, because as the dust settled and the echo of the shotgun rolled off into the timberline, I heard tires crunching up the gravel road. Sheriff was coming, and he wasn't coming alone. The tires I heard weren't backup. Too heavy, too slow. A lawman's engine has a certain sound, steady, deliberate, like judgment rolling uphill. The sheriff's SUV appeared through the dust, headlights cutting through the haze left by the shattered gate. It crawled to a stop, not rushed, measured, the way a man drives when he's already preparing the report in his head. Sheriff Warren Hardin stepped out. Big shoulders, sun-worn face. The posture of someone who had spent 30 years breaking up bar fights that all started the same way. His right hand rested on his holster, not gripping the gun, but close, too close to ignore. "Morning," he said, eyes not on me, but on the Remington still in my hands. I lowered it slowly and set it in the truck bed. "Step away from the truck, Eric," he said immediately. "Hands where I can see 'em." I did as he asked. Not because I was scared, but because you don't win against a sheriff's instinct. You survive it. Behind him, one of the guards yelled from inside the booth. "He attacked us! Broke the gate! He's armed! He's dangerous!" Hardin didn't look back. He sighed, the kind of sound a man makes when Monday just became a week. "Is that true?" he asked. I shrugged. "Depends on who you think owns this mountain." His hand settled firmer on the holster. "Eric, breaking a controlled access gate, assaulting 2 security officers. I could cuff you right here." I let that sit for a moment. Then I pointed at the mangled steel across the dirt. "Before you do, Sheriff, you might want to check where they put that gate." His jaw tightened. "And why's that?" "Because it's 6 feet inside the forest setback line. No permit, no survey stakes, no right to be here." Hardin didn't blink, didn't react, didn't believe me, not yet. He reached down and unclipped a heavy-duty GPS unit from his belt, the kind surveyors use. County issue, beat to hell, reliable. He punched a button, waited, looked at the screen, then at the broken gate posts, then back at the screen. A frown carved a deep line across his forehead. He walked 3 steps to a half-hidden bush and brushed it aside with his boot. There, sticking out of the earth, was an old iron boundary pin with a faded orange cap. Hardin stared at it, then at the gate. The gate was undeniably on the wrong side. "Well, hell," he muttered under his breath. The guard shouted again, high-pitched now. "Sheriff, he threatened us!" Hardin snapped his head toward the booth. "If he'd threatened you, son, you wouldn't be talking right now." He looked back at me, voice lowering. "All right, nobody's getting cuffed, for the moment, but you're staying put until we get this sorted." He wasn't siding with me. He wasn't siding with them. He was doing exactly what a good sheriff does, holding the ground steady while 2 storms rolled toward each other. I could have told him this wasn't just an HOA dispute. I could have told him what I smelled on the trail: diesel, hydraulic oil, corporate arrogance. But the mountain answered for me. Another engine echoed up the road, not rough like the sheriff's. Smooth, expensive, confident. A black SUV rounded the bend, dust swirling around its polished grille. The door opened before it even stopped, and that's when I knew. The real fight wasn't the guards, wasn't the gate, wasn't even the sheriff. It was whoever just stepped out of that SUV. The black SUV didn't rush. It glided, quiet, polished, confident, like trouble that paid its taxes on time. The door opened, and a woman stepped out, mid-40s, navy blazer, heels too clean for mountain gravel. Blonde hair pinned back in what I call a corporate battle helmet. She looked at the broken gate the way someone looks at spilled wine on a white carpet, annoyed, not shocked. "Mr. Phelps," she said, voice warm but empty. "I'm Lacey Kenner, Vice President of Whispering Pines. We need to have a conversation." Sheriff Hardin muttered under his breath, "Oh, for God's sake." But she pretended not to hear. She walked right up to the sheriff, ignoring me entirely. "Sheriff, thank you for responding so quickly. As you can see, a member of the public has forcibly destroyed community infrastructure, assaulted 2 of our licensed security officers, and is trespassing on Whispering Pines property." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not loud, not mocking, just a small, involuntary exhale of disbelief. Lacey finally turned to face me. "Is something amusing, Mr. Phelps?" "Yeah," I said. "You calling this your property?" Her smile tightened half an inch. "The Phelps parcel," she said the name like it tasted sour, "was legally absorbed into Whispering Pines Phase 2 last year, under the Community Expansion Act. We have the deed transfer recorded with the county. Your uncle's land was classified as abandoned." Sheriff Hardin rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am, there's no such thing as a Community Expansion Act. Not in this county." Lacey didn't flinch. "There is under state redevelopment policy." "No," I said. "There isn't. Not in Colorado." She gave me the kind of smile realtors use when a client can't afford the house. "Mr. Phelps, you've been absent from this property for over 2 years. Abandonment was clear. Absence isn't abandonment, I replied. Not in Colorado Revised Statute 3812. You want the full citation, or will the sheriff do it for you? Hardin lifted a hand. Let's not start quoting statutes at each other. Ms. Kenner, the setback issue alone means your gate is in violation. She cut him off. That gate is temporary and permitted. No, it isn't, I said immediately. Your GPS check already proved that. Her eyes flicked to Hardin. He didn't defend her. Silence settled, thin but sharp. Lacey regrouped fast. Well, she said, opening a folder thick with crisp papers, regardless of Mr. Phelps's emotional state, these documents confirm Whispering Pines acquired the parcel through a legal transfer. The notary's stamp is valid. The signatures match county records. And more importantly, she put a finger on one page, the sheriff's department is obligated to acknowledge this as community property. Sheriff Hardin stared at the form. His jaw tightened. You got a copy of the original parcel map? Of course. She handed it over like a dealer sliding cards. Hardin scanned it, then looked at me. You got your deed, Eric? Yes, sir. I handed him the worn folder. Edges frayed, ink faded, weight of 60 years of ownership pressed into the paper grain. He opened it slowly. The wind tugged at the pages. It felt like the forest itself was holding its breath. After a minute, the sheriff gave a long, low whistle. These signatures don't match, he said. Lacey stiffened. They absolutely do. No, Hardin repeated. They don't. He held up both documents against the light. Even from where I stood, you could see it, the smooth flowing pen stroke on the original and the stiff mechanical imitation on hers. Her voice sharpened. We are not handwriting analysts, Sheriff. Ma'am, he said, I don't need to be. I've signed enough arrest reports to know when ink belongs to one hand or two. Lacey's jaw twitched, but she still wasn't rattled, at least not visibly. She straightened her blazer. Sheriff, this man assaulted our officers and destroyed a gate. I expect him to be taken into custody immediately. Hardin turned slowly, a small but unmistakable gesture of refusal. No arrests today, he said. This here is a civil dispute, not criminal and not settled. The guards erupted from the booth. Sheriff, you're just going to let him walk? Hardin barked. Enough! His voice cracked through the trees like a whip. Even the wind paused. I said this is civil. Nobody moves until the county registrar reviews the filings. Nobody touches anything. And nobody, he pointed at Lacey, builds another damn inch until I get answers. Lacey closed her folder, but not before I saw her thumb tapping anxiously. 1, 2, 3, like someone running the numbers on how fast things were falling apart. She turned to me. This isn't over, Mr. Phelps. It never is, I said. Not with people who build gates on land they don't own. Her smile vanished. She walked back to her SUV, heels clicking like a metronome, counting down to the next fight. And I knew, when someone walks away that calm, that controlled, it means their next move is already in motion. Lacey's SUV disappeared down the trail without kicking up much dust. People like her never rush. They don't need to. Money does the running for them. Sheriff Hardin stayed behind a minute longer, staring at the broken gate like it offended him personally. You realize, he said finally, they're not done. I know. You also realize they're going to come back with paperwork, a lot of it. I know that too. He gave a dry grunt. Good. Because if you're wrong about your deed, I don't want to be the man who let you walk away. I didn't argue. He wasn't threatening me. He was warning me, the way old ranchers warn each other about storms that don't show on the radar. Hardin waved the guards out of the booth and ordered them to sit beside their SUV. They went grudgingly, mumbling into their radios like children who had been scolded. Then he turned to me again. Listen, Eric, go somewhere, anywhere but here. Let me file this mess with the county registrar. I'll need a day or two. Can't leave the cabin unprotected, I said. He exhaled hard enough that his hat brim fluttered. Son, if they want your cabin, they're not coming with crowbars. They're coming with lawyers, surveyors, and permits stamped so fast it'll make your head spin. He wasn't wrong. He also wasn't telling me anything I hadn't already figured out. I slung my pack over my shoulder. All right, I said. I'll give you space, but I'm not leaving the mountain. Hardin gave me a long look, measuring, like he was trying to decide whether that made me stubborn or suicidal. Fine, he said, but if you hear engines again, you call me first. And keep the damn shotgun in the truck unless you need it. He climbed into his SUV and rolled away, leaving me alone with the guard booth, the shattered gate, and the two bruised men glaring at me like I'd ruined their weekend. One of them hissed, "You're done, Phelps. You don't know who you're messing with." I walked past him without looking. I know exactly who I'm messing with. That wasn't bravado. It was simple math. People who build illegal gates don't stop at gates. By the time I reached my truck, the wind had picked up. Cold, sharp, carrying that industrial sting again. Hydraulic oil and cut timber. The smell of a future someone else was trying to build on land they didn't own. I drove up the mountain road, leaving the guards and the sheriff behind. The trail narrowed back into the familiar path I knew, the one untouched by heavy machinery and corporate ambition. But the deeper I went, the more I saw it. Freshly cut branches, trees toppled, stumps still wet, orange survey flags stabbed into the earth like small plastic lies. They hadn't just taken my gate, they'd taken my trees, my trail, my silence. And somewhere between the ridge and the cabin, something inside me cooled. Not anger, not fear, resolve. The kind that settles into a man's bones and doesn't leave. Because Lacey was right about one thing. This wasn't over, not even close. I parked beside the cabin, stepped out, and looked at the place that held the last pieces of my uncle's life. A place someone had tried to erase while I wasn't looking. "All right," I said quietly to the trees, the wind, and whatever else was listening. "Let's see who starts the next move." The cabin looked wrong before I even stepped out of the truck. Not destroyed. Not vandalized. Worse, clean. The kind of clean no man living alone in the mountains ever asks for. Uncle Marty never cared for neatness. Pine needles were part of the floor. Dust was insulation. Nature drifted inside and he drifted through it. But now, the porch had been swept. Windows wiped. Even the frame around the front door looked scrubbed like someone was trying to erase fingerprints. That kind of clean only means one thing: search. Someone had taken their time going through this place. A chill ran up my back, not fear, recognition. I'd seen houses in Afghanistan cleaned out before raids. Same pattern, same precision, same ugly intention. I walked up the steps slowly. The boards didn't creak the way they used to. They'd been tightened, replaced, a detail that pissed me off more than the broken gate. Don't fix things you don't own. I reached the door and stopped. Something white was stuck under the frame. At first I thought it was a flyer, maybe a survey tag, but when I bent down and pulled it loose, my stomach hardened. A legal notice, printed, stamped, signed by someone at the Whispering Pines Legal Committee. I read the first line out loud. Notice of intended property transfer. Upon further review, your presence on site constitutes unlawful occupation of Whispering Pines community land. I stopped reading. I didn't need the rest. This wasn't a warning. It was a declaration of war. I pushed open the door. Inside, the air smelled wrong. Not musty, not smoky, sterile, like a clinic, like someone had tried to sanitize the past. Furniture had been moved, the map table shoved into the corner, blankets folded with military corners, coffee pot gone. And then I saw it. The plank under the fireplace, the one Uncle Marty pried up every winter, had been nailed down. Not with his rusted old nails. These were new, silver, straight, too new. The boards around it were scraped, like someone had gotten impatient. Someone had tried to open it, failed, and hammered it shut to hide the attempt. I crouched and brushed sawdust away with my thumb. They were looking for something, I muttered. And that something wasn't here anymore, or they thought it wasn't. The room felt colder suddenly, and not because of the altitude. I stood, walked to the window, and scanned the clearing. 2 sets of fresh boot tracks, not the guards. Wider pattern, heavier, corporate contractors. I followed them with my eyes. They led not to the trail, but behind the cabin. I stepped outside and rounded the corner, and there it was. A small survey marker staked right into my uncle's vegetable patch. White plastic, red tip, company logo, Silverback Horizons, Phase 1 assessment. It wasn't the stake that made my pulse spike. It was the note taped to it, a single typed sentence. Parcel must be cleared before fiscal Q3. Fiscal, not legal, not ethical, financial. Silverback wasn't waiting for a judge. They weren't waiting for county approval. They weren't even waiting for the HOA. They were working on a corporate schedule, and I had just become a deadline problem. I tore the note down and shoved it in my jacket. Behind me, something creaked, a soft, lazy hinge. I spun. The cabin door had swung fully open, not from wind. The air was still. Mountain stillness is its own kind of silence, and I knew it well. Someone had opened that door recently, very recently. I stepped inside again, scanning the room, feeling the shape of the silence. That's when I saw the second document, taped to the inside of the door, a summons, filed, stamped, already logged with the county. You are hereby notified of pending litigation regarding trespass, property damage, assault on licensed personnel, and obstruction of community development. I didn't finish reading. Sheriff Hardin's words hit me like a hammer. You think this will be settled up here? They're not bringing crowbars. They're bringing lawyers. I folded the summons and shoved it in the same pocket as the silverback note. 2 papers, 2 threats, 2 clocks already ticking. Standing there in the half-sanitized remains of my uncle's life, something became painfully, sharply clear. I couldn't fight this from the mountain. Not yet. Not alone. Silverback wasn't some HOA vanity project. They were a developer with deadlines, investors, pressure, and probably a legal department with more staff than this county had deputies. Guns wouldn't stop them. Gates wouldn't stop them. But I knew someone who could make them bleed on paper. Robert Hales, federal prosecutor turned mountain hermit. A man who could gut a fraudulent filing faster than I could field strip the Remington. I stepped off the porch and headed for the truck. The wind picked up, brushing the trees like fingers on piano wire. Storm coming, not weather, war. I opened the truck door. Okay, Uncle, I murmured. I hear you. I started the engine. Time to go find Robert. The diner sat 30 miles down the mountain, tucked beside a gas station that hadn't changed its prices since the Bush administration. A neon sign buzzed in the window. Half the letters didn't work. The coffee tasted like burnt mud. But it was the one place where people talked straight. Robert Hales was already there. He sat in the corner booth, the one with a cracked red cushion and a view of both exits. Old habits die slow with men who once worked federal cases. He looked up as I walked in. Didn't smile. Didn't need to. Eric, he said, you look like a man who found a bear in his kitchen. Close, I replied, dropping 2 folded papers on the table. The HOA summons and the silverback fiscal note. He didn't touch them yet, just stared with that knife blade calm of his. You order coffee? He asked. Not yet. Don't, he said. It's terrible. I sat. He finally reached for the papers and opened the summons first, eyes moving slow, methodical, like a surgeon inspecting x-rays before slicing anything open. He muttered. That's quick. Too quick. How quick is too quick? He tapped the stamp. This was filed before the sheriff even got up there. Whispering Pines knew you'd show up today. My jaw tightened. He flipped to the second page. This notarization is sloppy. Stamp pressure's uneven. Name's too clean. He raised an eyebrow. Notary is Mark D. Miller. Ring a bell? Karen Miller's ex-husband, I said. Robert snorted. A family business and fraud. Classy. Then he opened the second paper, the silverback note. He read it once, then again. Then he leaned back in the booth and let out a low whistle. Now this, he said, tapping it, this is the real trouble. This is corporate, not HOA nonsense. You know them? Everybody knows Silverback, he said. Developers with more lawyers than conscience. If this note is real, they're already betting on your land as part of Phase 1. They're not waiting for approval. They're assuming they'll either bully you out or bury you in paperwork. I let that settle. The diner felt suddenly smaller. The world outside felt much larger. Robert lifted his mug, grimaced at the taste, and kept drinking anyway. Tell me exactly what you found at the cabin. I told him. The cleaned interior, the nailed-down floorboard, the survey flags, the attempted entry, the tracks behind the house, the sense that someone had been searching for something. He didn't interrupt, didn't blink. Didn't even sip his coffee while I talked. When I finished, he spoke quietly. They weren't cleaning. They were collecting. For what? He steepled his fingers. For anything your uncle left behind that could prove your ownership. Old maps, surveys, correspondence, things you don't think matter, but they do. Whispering Pines tried to steal your land with paper. Silverback is trying to make sure you can't steal it back the same way. The waitress set a plate of eggs down without asking if we wanted them. Mountain diners take initiative like that. Robert didn't touch his food. If they hammered that plank shut, he said, it means they didn't find what they were looking for. That left a cold taste in my mouth. He opened the fiscal note again. Parcel must be cleared before Q3. You know what this is? This isn't a message for workers. This is a message for investors. They've put your land in their pitch deck. They've promised it already. So, they're desperate, I said. He nodded. Desperate people make mistakes, but powerful people cover them up with money. Robert pulled a legal pad toward him and wrote 3 words. Injunction, cease and desist, evidence, lock. That's your plan, he said. I'm filing an injunction in the morning. That'll freeze construction. The cease and desist goes to the HOA today, and the evidence lock forces them to preserve every document. That enough to stop them? He shook his head. No, but it slows them, and sometimes slowing the enemy is how you survive the first battle. The diner door opened. Wind rushed in, cold, sharp, carrying the smell of snow. Robert closed the folder. One more thing, he said. You're not going back up there alone tonight. I can handle myself. I know, he replied. That's what worries me. He pushed the summons back across the table. This isn't a gunfight. This is a paper war, and those bastards write fast. I stood. So do we. A small glint of satisfaction crossed his eyes. Oh, Eric, he said, folding his coat. We write faster. The sky was turning the color of steel wool when I drove back up the mountain. Snow clouds gathering, the kind that don't just fall. They settle in, crawl down the ridge, and stay a while. Robert told me not to return alone. I ignored him. Some fights you need to see with your own eyes, without a witness to soften the edges. The road up looked the same for the first mile, then it didn't. Someone had hung a new chain across the trail, not flimsy, industrial, thick enough to tow a tractor, threaded through drilled holes in the trees like a trap line, and a fresh sign bolted into the bark. Whispering Pines Construction Zone, Permit 43A. There was no Permit 43A. Robert checked every county record twice. I stepped out of the truck and ran a hand along the chain. Cold, oil-smelling, installed within the last few hours. Behind me, a branch snapped. I turned. No person, just the wind. But the hair on my arm stood up anyway. That's when I saw it, mounted high on a pine trunk, a brand new surveillance camera, blinking red, not cheap, infrared, 360° swivel, corporate grade. It wasn't aimed at the trail, it was aimed at my truck. I stared at the camera until the lens clicked, adjusting focus. A machine watching me on land no one else had the right to stand on. That was the moment a very clean, very deliberate anger settled into my bones. I grabbed the chain with both hands, pulled it tight, and lifted. The bolt anchoring it to the tree creaked, groaned, then snapped loose like a rotten tooth. Chain dropped. Camera blinked twice, adjusting again. I lifted a rock the size of a cantaloupe and hurled it. The lens shattered into a spider web of glass. Watch someone else, I muttered. I drove through, up the clearing, toward the cabin, and the closer I got, the more the sense of intrusion sharpened. The trees had been trimmed deeper, bushes cut, another layer of survey flags stabbed into the soil. A second camera, then a third. A fourth pointed straight at the porch. Someone had worked fast, too fast. That's when I saw vehicle tracks, recent, maybe an hour old. Wide tires. Too wide for the HOA guard's SUV, not sheriff. Contractors, or worse, Silverback's private crew. I knelt, touched the tread. Warm. They'd been here right before I arrived. The cabin door stood half open, not broken, not kicked, just open. A deliberate kind of open. A message. I stepped inside. More things had moved. The tin cup that had hung on a nail since the Reagan years, gone. The map table shoved again, boot prints on the floor, not mine. And then something new. A small black box glowing faintly in the corner, tucked behind the woodpile. I walked over, crouched, and recognized it immediately. A motion sensor hub. Someone had wired my cabin like a temporary surveillance outpost. A cold breath slid down my neck. I pulled the battery and crushed it under my boot. When I stepped back outside, the world felt smaller, like the mountain itself was holding its breath. That's when I heard gravel popping. I knew that sound now, the sheriff's SUV. Hard and rolled up fast this time, tires spraying sleet. He stepped out, hat pulled low, jaw tight. "Eric," he said, "what the hell did you do now?" "Nothing," I said. "Not this time." He looked around, saw the camera shards, the chain, the survey flags. His face went still. "That chain wasn't there this morning," he said. "No," I replied, "and neither were the cameras." He cursed under his breath. "I told them not to touch anything, told both parties, told them I'd have their permits suspended if they did." "Well," I said, "someone didn't listen." Hardin walked to the porch and spotted the motion sensor remains. He turned to me, eyes narrowing. "They're escalating." "No," I corrected. "They're desperate." He didn't argue. The wind picked up, cold enough to sting. Hardin zipped his coat, stepped up beside me. "You break that chain?" "Yes." "Break that camera too?" "Yes." "You know I could cite you." "You won't." He stared at me long enough that I couldn't tell if he was going to cuff me or laugh. Finally, he shook his head. "You're damn lucky the law cares more about property boundaries than broken electronics." Then he glanced at the tire tracks leading away from the cabin. "These aren't HOA," he said. "No. Silverback. Damn it!" He kicked at the snow-dusted dirt. "They're testing you," he said. "Pushing. Seeing how far they can go before you snap or before I arrest somebody. They won't get either." Hardin didn't look convinced. He dug into his coat, pulled out a folded paper, county letterhead. "This came in an hour ago," he said. "Emergency motion from Whispering Pines. They want you barred from the property during review." I opened it. Reading it felt like swallowing ice. They'd filed it fast. Too fast. Someone had everything prepared in advance. "And there's more," Hardin said. He produced a second document, a citation, a fire code violation against me. "I didn't file this," he said, "but it's in your name." My pulse dropped a notch. "Kevin Rotherman," I said. "Yeah," Hardin replied. "All the paperwork is routed through him." The mountainside went quiet again, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. Hardin spoke softly. "Eric, I can't fight them on paper. Not my job, not my jurisdiction." "I know," I said. "You have a lawyer?" "I do." "Then use him." I folded both papers. Snow started to fall, thin flakes drifting like ash. Hardin looked at the sky. "We're going to have a long week." "No," I said. "We're going to end theirs." Robert didn't waste time. By the next morning, his truck rumbled into the diner parking lot, tires crunching over frost. He looked like he hadn't slept, but somehow sharper for it, the way some men look clearer after a bar fight. He slid into the booth without greetings and dropped a stack of papers thicker than a hunting manual onto the table. "Injunctions filed," he said. "Judge stamped it at 8:14 a.m. That freezes everything up the mountain until ownership is clarified." "That'll stop them?" "No," he said bluntly. "It just makes what they're doing illegal. That's step one." I raised an eyebrow. "Step two?" He smirked without humor. "Make them bleed for doing it anyway." He tapped the top form. "This is the cease and desist. Every camera, chain, stake, and guard they put on your land is now an active violation. And the county registrar has been forced to produce every deed transfer since '78. That part made me sit a little straighter. "What did they find?" "Nothing yet," he replied, "but the silence is suspicious. County offices are usually sloppy. They misplace things, stamp pages out of order. This time," he leaned in, "they're too clean, too organized. Someone's pulling strings. Silverback. Most likely." He opened another folder and slid it toward me. "This is the fun part," he said. "Whispering Pines filed a lawsuit against you last night." I skimmed the pages. 8 counts, all lies, trespass, destruction of community property, assault, threatening behavior with implied deadly force, unauthorized vehicle operation in a designated development zone. "They're fast," I said. "No," Robert corrected. "They're ready. This wasn't written yesterday. This was written weeks ago. They were waiting." I blew out a breath, slow and controlled. That chain across my trail, the motion sensors, the filed summons, it was all prepped. Robert tapped the lawsuit. "Eric, they had this drafted before the snow fell. They assumed you wouldn't come back, and when you did, they assumed you'd do what you did. Fight. And now? Now they're pushing everything through the county, hard." He pulled another sheet from his bag, a routing slip, a zoning complaint, filed against me, and I recognized it instantly. Another fire code violation, I said, jaw tightening. Hardin showed me the first one last night, all routed through Kevin Rotherman. Robert nodded, flipping the page like he expected that part. Yeah, and what Hardin didn't know, he said, tapping the signature line, is that Rotherman's been doing this for years, fast-tracking HOA filings, slow-walking private deeds, burying complaints. He's not just routing paperwork, he's shaping it. I leaned back in the booth, feeling the weight settle deeper. So, he's dirty. Dirty, Robert said, and well paid for it. He pulled another printout, internal county routing logs. This isn't just favoritism. Rotherman is consulting, off the books, for a silverback shell company. He's the inside man. The pieces locked together, a quiet, ugly click. So, that's who he really is. Robert closed the folder and rubbed his temples with the back of his knuckles. Eric, listen. You're not in a dispute with an HOA. You're in a triangle choke between the county and a corporate developer that probably spent more on lawyers last year than this entire town earns in a decade. I didn't say anything, didn't need to. The weight of it settled in quietly, cold and metallic. He continued. The good news? They rushed, and rushing leaves fingerprints. What's our move? Robert slid a pen across the table. We file a countersuit that makes their hair catch fire. Fraudulent transfer, forgery, unauthorized private security, environmental falsification, malicious prosecution. And will that stop them? He smiled. Small, sharp, no, but it'll hurt. And hurting people who think they're untouchable is how you make them panic. The diner door opened. Wind swept inside, bringing sleet and silence with it. Robert glanced out the window. You feel that? He asked. The air had shifted, heavy, pressing, the kind of pressure that comes before a storm. Yeah, I said quietly. I feel it. He stood, buttoned his coat. Get ready, Eric. They haven't even begun to fight back. But when they do, he tapped the lawsuit packet once. You'll want to be standing where the ground is solid. And where's that? He paused. Right where they don't expect you to stand. We didn't stay in town. Robert slammed his truck door shut and pointed his chin toward the mountain. Let's go see if your injunction has teeth, he said. The wind was getting sharper, slicing across the valley in thin sheets. The sky over the ridge looked bruised, heavy with snow, heavy with trouble. We climbed in and headed up the old logging road, tires grinding over ice and gravel. Halfway up, I saw it, and my hands tightened on the steering wheel. Robert, that wasn't there yesterday. He followed my gaze. A fresh set of tire ruts, deep, clean, straight, from a vehicle heavier than any pickup. And they weren't heading down the mountain, they were heading up. We rounded the bend, and there it was. A sight that punched the breath out of me. The guard booth Whispering Pines had installed, gone. In its place, a brand new temporary construction trailer parked across the easement, humming with generator power, fresh fuel cans stacked beside it. 3 men in reflective jackets were unloading survey gear from a flatbed truck. They weren't HOA. They weren't weekend volunteers. These were professionals. I killed the engine. Robert exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled. They didn't stop, he said. They doubled down. We stepped out. Cold bit my cheeks immediately. One of the men, a thick-necked supervisor with a clipboard and a radio, spotted us. He walked over like he owned the dirt under his boots. This site is restricted, he barked. Land is under Whispering Pines development jurisdiction. You need to... Robert held up the injunction so fast it sliced the air. This was signed by a district judge yesterday morning, he said. Any construction on this parcel is criminal contempt. The supervisor didn't even look at the paper. Talk to the HOA, he said. We go where we're told. That was a mistake. Robert didn't step back. He stepped closer. He lifted the injunction until it nearly touched the man's chest. You see this seal? Robert said, voice low and razor flat. That's the state of Colorado. Not your HOA. Not your contractor buddies. Supervisor smirked. I told you. Robert cut him off by pulling his phone from his coat and dialing on speaker. Who are you calling? The man asked. Sheriff Hardin, Robert said. And if he doesn't pick up, the district judge who signed this order. The supervisor's smirk bled off his face like warm paint in cold rain. Robert didn't blink. This is your one chance, he said. You and your men pack every tool, every stake, every can of fuel, and leave this mountain before the law gets here. He leaned in until they were inches apart. Because if they arrive first, you'll be charged with criminal contempt. Your company will lose its state license, and you'll be explaining to your wife why your paycheck died in the snow." Silence fell. The drone hovering above us seemed to pause mid-air, like it was listening. The supervisor touched his radio. "Stand by," he whispered. Robert lowered his phone without hanging up. Then he turned to me and spoke loud enough for every man on site to hear. "Eric, let's go document the rest of the violations while these gentlemen decide whether they want to keep their licenses." The contractor crew froze. Nobody moved another shovel. We walked past the trailer toward the cabin trail, and every 10 feet brought a fresh violation. New metal stakes driven after the injunction. Robert photographed them. Fresh chainsaw cuts on young pines. He photographed those too. Survey flags forming a grid, foundation layout. Illegal. "They're accelerating," Robert said quietly, trying to get as far ahead as possible before enforcement hits. "And who told them to push this fast?" I asked. We didn't need to answer. A drone buzzed overhead again. That was answer enough. When we reached the cabin clearing, I stopped cold. The cabin sat under a thin sheet of frost. Quiet. Still. But around it, footprints. Fresh ones. 5 sets at least. One set led straight to the window. Robert crouched. These were made after sunrise. Someone was inside. I walked straight to the door. The latch looked untouched, but the wood carried a fresh scar. Long, thin, the mark of a lockpick. Inside, nothing looked stolen. But things weren't right. A drawer slightly misaligned. A mug moved half an inch from where I'd left it. Dust disturbed in a perfect oval near the map table. Robert scanned the room. "They're searching for something," he said. "No," I corrected. "They're afraid I already found it." We stepped back outside. A radio crackled from the trailer. "Copy. Owner and lawyer still on site. Advise." Supervisor answered, "Standing by." Standing by, waiting for permission to escalate. Snow began to fall, thin, cold, drifting sideways with the wind. I looked at the drone circling overhead, listening to the generator hum in the distance, the snap of survey flags against the wind. "They're not scared of the injunction," I said. "No," Robert replied. "They're scared of what comes next." "What comes next?" He buttoned his coat. "We push back even harder, and when we do," he nodded at the drone, "somebody on their side is going to panic. And panicked people," he smiled grimly, "they always leave evidence." The snow thickened as we headed back down the mountain, not heavy enough to blind the road, but enough to muffle sound, blur footprints, erase the tracks of anyone who wanted to pretend they'd never been there. Silverback would like that. Clean snow covers dirty hands. Robert rode silent for a while, scrolling through the photos he'd taken. Every illegal stake, every chainsawed stump, every contractor boot print. "What's your read?" I asked. He kept scrolling. "They're cornered," he said finally, "and cornered people either retreat or get stupid." We both knew Silverback wasn't the retreating type. At the next turnout, Robert told me to stop. He climbed out, boots crunching over ice, and pointed at a cluster of deep tire tracks leading off the road. "These weren't here last week," he said. "Whatever they're moving up the mountain, it's expensive and not meant to leave a trail." I crouched beside them. "Flatbed?" I guessed. "Or drilling rig," Robert said. "Hard to say, but neither belongs anywhere near your land." He snapped a few more photos, then nodded toward the truck. "Come on, there's someone we need to talk to." His someone was waiting 20 miles south, at a dusty gas station, where the neon sign buzzed louder than the highway. A man leaned against a rusted Subaru, smoking like the world was ending, and he was trying to get one last cigarette in before it did. Early 50s, flannel jacket, construction boots, face carved by sun and stress. He flicked the cigarette away when he saw us and straightened. "You Phelps?" he asked. "That's me." He extended a calloused hand. "Name's Don Keller. I was a subcontractor on the Whispering Pines expansion." Robert crossed his arms. "And why did you ask to meet us off the record?" Don laughed, harsh, empty. "Because I like breathing air that isn't piped through a lawsuit." He jerked his chin toward the mountains behind us. "You want to know why Silverback wants your land so damn bad?" Robert didn't speak. He didn't have to. Don wiped snow off his jacket sleeve and reached into his coat. He pulled out a folded, weather-beaten document. Edges curled, coffee-stained, like it had survived a war. He handed it to me. I unfolded it. A site integration plan. Not HOA, not county. Silverback. And in the bottom right corner, stamped in bold black ink, Phase 1 clearance. Expected completion, Q1. Under it, Phelps parcel, pending acquisition. My grip tightened. Robert took the paper and scanned it. This is internal, he said quietly. Real internal. Yeah, Don said. Got handed to subcontractors so we'd know where to prep the access roads. But then things started going sideways. He leaned closer. You ever wonder why the HOA's been so aggressive? Why they're throwing money at guard booths, contractors, signage? Hell, those clowns can't organize a bake sale without suing each other. Robert nodded. They're being bankrolled. Worse, Don said. They're being used. Snow swirled around us. Traffic hummed in the distance. But something in Don's voice cut through everything else. What does Silverback want? I asked. His jaw tightened. They found something under your land. Robert blinked. Found what? Don hesitated, just long enough to show he wasn't sure he should say it. Then he said it anyway. Water. My brow furrowed. What kind of water? The kind developers drool over. A clean, cold aquifer that runs straight under your ridge, deep enough to feed a resort, pure enough to pass every environmental standard without filtration. Silverback's engineers think it could support 3,000 guests a year. Robert exhaled slowly. So, that's the motive, Don nodded. And that's why they needed your land. Not as a welcome center. As a water rights anchor. They get the first pump installed, they own the entire watershed. And the HOA? I asked. Distraction, Don said. And useful idiots. He kicked the slush with his boot. Listen, I'm sticking my neck out telling you this. But those survey crews you saw, they weren't looking for boundary markers. They were confirming the exact depth for drilling. Robert snapped a photo of the document. Will you testify if it comes to it? Don laughed again, harder, louder, like someone kicking gravel down a mine shaft. Oh, hell no, he said. Silverback eats people like me. He turned toward his car. But I'll send you something bigger, something they don't know I copied. What is it? I asked. It's what you need to bury them, he said, and what they'll kill to keep buried. He climbed into his Subaru, slammed the door, and drove off without looking back. Robert and I sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, he said, This just changed everything. What's the play now? He started the truck engine. Simple, he said. We expose them. He looked toward the mountain ridge where the drone had circled us earlier. And once Silverback realizes you know their secret, he gave a grim half smile. They're going to panic, and panic makes people sloppy. Sloppy enough for us to rip the whole operation wide open. The courthouse in Ridgetop wasn't much to look at, just a squat concrete building with faded blue trim and a flag that whipped sideways in the wind like it was trying to escape. But inside, things were already moving. People whispered. Reporters waited with notebooks. 3 HOA members huddled in one corner, pale and shaking. And Karen Miller, queen of Whispering Pines HOA, sat stiff as steel in the front row, jaw clenched hard enough to break teeth. Robert walked beside me like he was stepping into a hunting blind, calm, controlled, deadly. He sipped burnt courthouse coffee as if it made him stronger. You ready? He asked. My uncle didn't build that cabin so some paper crooks could steal it, I said. So yeah, I'm ready. The bailiff opened the doors. All rise. Judge Brannon walked in. Mid-50s, hair in a tight bun, wireframe glasses. The type of woman whose expression never changed unless the universe truly disappointed her. She sat. We did too. Call the case, she said. The clerk rattled off the docket number. HOA versus Phelps. Civil trespass, destruction of community property, assault on licensed personnel, motion for restraining order, then counterclaims filed by Mr. Phelps, represented by attorney Robert Hales. The judge turned to the HOA's table. Ms. Miller, she said, your counsel is present? A thin man with nervous hands stood. Yes, Your Honor, James Paulton, representing Whispering Pines HOA. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Judge Brannon nodded. Very well, let's proceed. Paulton stood first. He tried to sound confident. He didn't succeed. Your Honor, Mr. Phelps unlawfully entered a designated HOA development zone and demolished a legally installed gate. He physically assaulted 2 security officers. Robert rose so smoothly, it was like standing was part of breathing. Your Honor, may I respond? Proceed, the judge said. Robert didn't raise his voice, didn't show teeth. He simply laid out the facts like a surgeon making the first incision. The gate was placed 6 feet inside my client's property line. We verified this with a GPS coordinate check conducted by Sheriff Hardin at the scene. No permit was filed with the county for construction of that gate, nor any related structures, including the guard booth. He handed a document to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. This is the certified copy of the injunction granted yesterday morning, ordering all work on Mr. Phelps's land to cease pending ownership clarification. The judge skimmed it. Mr. Paulton, she said without looking up, your clients received this order? Paulton flinched. They were not aware. Robert slid another document forward. These photographs, taken this morning, show contractors actively working on the disputed land after the injunction was issued. Judge Brannon's eyes darkened a shade. That is contempt, she said. Karen stiffened. Lacey beside her whispered something frantic. Robert wasn't finished. Furthermore, he said, the licensed security officers referenced in the HOA's complaint, he lifted a page, hold no valid private security license in the state of Colorado. One has a prior charge for impersonating an officer. The judge looked at HOA counsel. Is this accurate? Paulton swallowed like a man trying to force down a brick. It appears there may have been an oversight. The judge's mouth didn't move, but somehow the room got colder. Robert paced a slow step. And the notary who allegedly certified the deed transfer to Whispering Pines? He tapped the document again. Mark D. Miller, commission revoked 3 years ago for document fraud. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Karen's face went white. Lacey looked like she was about to be sick. The judge adjusted her glasses. Mr. Paulton, she said, did your clients knowingly submit a falsified deed? We believe the documentation to be legitimate, Your Honor. The HOA board assured me. That's enough, the judge said. Robert gave me a tiny nod. He had more, much more. Your Honor, he continued, this morning we also received information from a subcontractor formerly employed by Whispering Pines' development partners. Karen snapped her head up, panic in her eyes. Robert handed over the Silverback Phase 1 clearance document Don Keller gave us. The judge read the title. Her brows lifted. This is not an HOA document. No, Your Honor, Robert said. It is a Silverback Horizons internal planning sheet. It lists Mr. Phelps' land as part of a resort expansion project and refers to the parcel as pending acquisition, 6 months before the alleged HOA vote took place. Judge Brannon sat back in her chair. Mr. Paulton, she asked, why is a for-profit developer creating plans that include land the HOA claims to have acquired legally? Paulton shook his head rapidly. I wasn't aware, Robert cut in, precise and deadly. And notice, Your Honor, the HOA's budget includes a sudden influx of $312,000 listed as community development donation. That amount matches a transfer from a Silverback Shell Corporation filed with the state 2 months before the gate was built. Even the reporter stopped writing for a moment. The judge looked from the document to Karen. Ms. Miller, would you like to explain this? Karen's voice cracked. They told us the land was abandoned. They told us the deed was valid. We were instructed that Silverback would handle the filings. Her lawyer grabbed her arm. Karen, he whispered, stop talking. But it was too late. She had confessed the one thing Silverback needed her to keep quiet. The judge removed her glasses and set them down carefully, a gesture that felt like thunder hitting the ground. This court, she said slowly, finds significant evidence of fraudulent transfer, unauthorized development, contempt of court, and possible conspiracy between Whispering Pines HOA and Silverback Horizons. She turned to me. Mr. Phelps, your motion for immediate protection of property is granted. All HOA and contractor entities are banned from approaching the parcel pending criminal review. Then to Karen and her board, and Whispering Pines will prepare to answer for these violations severely. A low panic spread across the HOA benches. Phones buzzed. Whispers broke loose. Lacey began to cry silently. Karen stared ahead, unblinking, like a woman feeling the ground collapse beneath her. Robert gathered his folders calmly. You did good, he said. That didn't feel good, I replied. No, he said, but it's the kind of good that hurts the right people. He paused, lowering his voice. And trust me, Eric, Silverback just felt their first crack. 3 days after the hearing, the mountain went quiet. Not peaceful, not safe. Quiet the way a forest gets before a predator steps out of the brush. Robert and I had spent the time preparing filings, answering calls from investigators, and dodging HOA members who suddenly wanted to clarify misunderstandings now that they realized their queen had no army left. But something still lingered, something unfinished. Silverback hadn't shown its face in court. They let the HOA burn. They let Karen crumble. They didn't send a statement, a denial, a lawyer, not even a PR intern to say the word miscommunication. That told me one thing: they weren't done, and they were waiting for the right moment to strike back. That moment came at dawn. A diesel engine groaned somewhere near the ridge, deep and low, the kind of sound you feel more than hear. I'd been sleeping in the cabin again, sleeping light, shotgun within reach. When the first vibration hit the floorboards, my eyes opened instantly. I moved to the window. Fog crawled over the treetops like living smoke, but through it, faint and unmistakable, strobed red lights flickered. Construction lights. Robert stepped onto the porch behind me, coffee in hand. "They're not giving up," he said. "No," I replied, "but they're getting desperate." We grabbed gear and hiked toward the sound, staying low, moving between boulders and fallen timber. The trail curved, and that's when we saw them. 3 trucks, 2 generators, 1 drilling rig, right on my land, right on top of the natural spring Uncle Marty marked on his topo map with the words, "Don't dig, bad luck below." Robert swore under his breath. "They're trying to install the first pump station," he said. "If they get a drill in the ground, the state will treat it as precedent. Even illegal wells have legal consequences. And then they'll argue the water rights belong to the development," I said. He nodded grimly. "This is their endgame. Quick strike, no paperwork, move fast, get a wellhead in before law enforcement can respond." A supervisor in a reflective jacket barked orders while workers lowered a pipe segment from the flatbed. Their motions were frantic, not confident, not controlled. Desperation has a rhythm, and these men were playing it like a drum. The drilling rig's engine roared to life. Robert grabbed my arm. "We need evidence, photos, video, anything to prove they ignored the injunction." I pulled out my phone. Fog thickened. Wind howled. The mountainside felt like it was holding its breath. As I zoomed in on the rig, something caught my eye, just past the equipment, near a cluster of rocks. A metal case half buried in snow. Smooth edges, padlocked. That wasn't contractor equipment. It looked more like record storage or evidence disposal. I pointed. "What the hell is that?" Robert followed my gaze. "If that's what I think it is..." He didn't finish. We moved closer, slow, careful, staying along the tree line. The wind masked our steps. The drill roared again, shuddering through the earth like a heartbeat made of steel. When we reached the metal case, I brushed snow off the top. A serial tag read, "SBHZN Internal Use Only, Silverback Horizons." Inside my chest, something turned to ice. Robert crouched and ran a finger along the seal. "They're staging documents," he whispered, "either to use later or to destroy." We didn't have time to open it. The rig whined louder, gears grinding, metal biting rock. Robert grabbed my shoulder. "Eric, if they hit the spring, they'll contaminate the whole aquifer, not just your land, half the valley." And then something clicked in my head. My uncle's hidden floorboard. The nail that wasn't there before. The space beneath it, emptier than expected. They'd been searching the cabin, but not for valuables, not for guns, not for maps. They were searching for whatever Marty hid that could destroy them. And suddenly, I knew. He hadn't hidden it under the floor alone. He hid something on the mountain, something tied to that spring, a survey, a water quality assessment, or maybe... "Robert," I said slowly, "I need to check something, back at the cabin." Before he could respond, a shout erupted behind us. "Hey, you two, stop!" A contractor had spotted us. 4 more turned. 1 reached for a radio. I didn't wait. We ran. Not downhill, not toward safety, toward the cabin, toward whatever Uncle Marty meant by bad luck below. We reached the cabin just as the fog lifted enough to reveal the ridge. Inside, I tore up the loose plank again, this time checking deeper, feeling for seams, for hollow pockets, for anything that didn't sound right. Nothing. "Eric," Robert said from the doorway, "we don't have time for guesswork." I stared at the plank, at the notch, at the grain. My uncle was many things, broken, reclusive, paranoid, but he wasn't sloppy. If he hid something, he hid it twice. I suddenly flipped the plank, revealing the underside, and there it was, a strip of waterproof canvas, stapled tight, weathered but intact. I peeled it open. Inside, a topographical map, a geological survey, 4 water table readings, and a signed state hydrology report from 1978, stamped, sealed, untouched. The report stated, plain as day, that the spring under my land was privately held, not suitable for commercial draw, protected by watershed conservation statutes. The phrasing mattered, not suitable for commercial draw, protected. Silverback wasn't just wrong, they were dead. Robert's eyes widened. Eric, this kills their entire project. Not just theirs, I said. It kills the HOA conspiracy, the land grab, every illegal stake they drove into the ground. He took the documents like they were made of gold and glass. They drilled on protected water, he whispered. That's criminal. A new sound rumbled outside. Not wind, not snow. Engines, multiple. The drilling rig's roar had stopped, and in its place, shouting, footsteps, radios crackling. Silverback had realized we'd found something, and they were coming. Robert backed toward the window. We need to leave, now. I grabbed my shotgun. No, I said. They tried to steal this mountain. They tried to bury evidence. They tried to break me. I stepped onto the porch. Fog twisted around the silhouettes of approaching workers and 2 men in corporate jackets. Silverback's real enforcers, not contractors. One shouted, Phelps, give us the map and walk away. Walk away. That was their offer. I lifted the shotgun, not aiming at anyone, but at the sky. A warning. My voice cut through the cold. This is protected land, and you just committed felony water violations. They froze. Some didn't understand. But the men in corporate jackets did, their faces drained. Robert stepped beside me, injunction in one hand, hydrology report in the other. This, he said, is going straight to the state attorney general. A dead silence settled over the mountain. Then, sirens. Sheriff Hardin's voice boomed from a loudspeaker. Nobody move. This is a crime scene. Contractors dropped tools. Silverback's men backed away. One tried to run and was immediately tackled. Hardin approached, eyes burning. You boys brought a drill onto protected watershed, he growled. You must have lost your damn minds. Silverback had collapsed. The HOA collapsed with them. The mountain stayed standing. Weeks later, the land was quiet again. Charges mounted. Silverback's executives resigned. Karen took a plea deal. Lacey flipped early and gave statements that made prosecutors whistle. The HOA dissolved, and the spring, untouched, unviolated, still whispered beneath the rock. I rebuilt the cabin slowly, leaving its scars as reminders. And at the gate, I hung a new sign. No HOA, no trespass, no more lies. Underneath, carved small, bad luck below, good luck to those who respect the mountain.